Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
10 to 6, Friday evening. Tom Swarbrick on LBC means, yes, one thing. Everything you need to know, presented with the flair and panache of a seasoned pro. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax. He'll take it from here. It's Simon Marks, American Week.
Tom, last week I told you that I thought we may have witnessed the moment when America ceased to be a democracy as the president defied court orders. Now, as Trump's second full month back in the White House approaches its end, I fear we may have seen the moment at which the country became a police state. On Tuesday afternoon, in a quiet residential neighbourhood of Somerville, Massachusetts, Tufts University doctoral student Rumeysa Ozturk was walking to meet some friends when she was suddenly accosted. 6 federal agents, each of them deliberately concealing their identity with masks, stopped her in her tracks and told her that she needed to accompany them. A local resident filmed the scene.
Is this a kidnapping? Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces? Seems like bull to me. Certainly looks like it.
What it actually looks like is the kind of thing that happens on the streets of Russia, Belarus or North Korea. Government agents dressed in black seizing a civilian off the streets, handcuffing her, forcing her into an unmarked vehicle, even though they did not charge her with any crime, and then causing her literal disappearance. Ms. Ozturk, who has been here since 2018 after winning a Fulbright scholarship in her native Turkey, could not be found by her lawyers for 24 hours. She was eventually tracked down to a federal detention centre in Louisiana, 1,500 miles from the scene of her arrest and in direct contravention of a court order.
Could you help us understand what the specific action she took led to her visa being revoked? Yeah. And what was your State Department's role in that process?
We revoked her visa.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday announcing that Ms. Ozturk is being thrown out of the country. Her crime, which of course is not a crime, appears to have been expressing an opinion that the Trump administration doesn't like. Last year, she co-authored an entirely legal article for the Tufts University student newspaper, in which she called on the college to divest from its investments in Israel and to brand Israel's military assault on Gaza a genocide, a resolution that students had passed in the university's Senate. There is no evidence that she did anything else. She simply wrote an editorial for a student newspaper and became public enemy number 1.
If you apply for a visa to enter the United States and be a student, and you tell us that the reason why you're coming to the United States is not just because you want to write op-eds, but because you want to participate in movements that are involved in doing things like vandalizing universities, harassing students, taking over buildings, creating a ruckus, we're not going to give you a visa.
And again, just to be clear, the government has presented no evidence that Ms. Ozturk vandalised Tufts, harassed students, took over buildings or engaged in creating a ruckus. And who knows what creating a ruckus means in legal terms, but she certainly didn't kidnap people off the streets to the shock of onlookers, unlike her personal Trump tormentors. The Secretary of State disclosed last night that he has already revoked the visas of more than 300 students here, many of whom are presumed to have done little more than participate in protests over Gaza. And for any families who may still be thinking about sending their kids to an American university, here's a bit more from the Secretary of State.
I think it's crazy to invite students into your country that are coming onto your campus and destabilizing it. We're just not going to have it. We don't want it in our country. Go back and do it in your country. But you're not going to do it in our country.
Rarely have we seen an allegedly bright American politician sell out so quickly. But he is not the only one engaging in increasingly authoritarian actions in order to secure the approval of President Trump.
I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities.
Kristi Noem, the president's Secretary of Homeland Security in El Salvador this week at the maximum security detention center to which the Trump administration 2 weeks ago flew 238 Venezuelans that she calls terrorists and that a judge had ruled must not leave the US. And she wasn't just visiting the facility. Ms. Nome filmed a ghoulish video with many of the jailed deportees ordered to stand behind her in a cell as she boasted of having dispatched them to El Salvador's gulag.
If you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Stop me when this becomes familiar, but the government has provided no evidence to support claims that the deportees committed crimes against the American people. The White House is suppressing all information relating to them. Certainly, some of the men caught up in the president's maw appear to have been thrown out of the country simply because of their tattoos, which the government claims may indicate support for the criminal cartel Tren de Aragua, but which many families say instead indicate support for Real Madrid. I am not making this up. And since the Trump administration has denied all of them any due legal process, who are you going to believe? The families or the guys who deport first, defy court orders, and then refuse to answer questions later? The question of who to believe was being asked in other quarters as well this week.
You say, yeah, sure, message me. And then the next thing you know, you're part of the PC Houthi small group on Signal with Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and the head of the CIA.
Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, who found himself inadvertently added to a group chat on the messaging app Signal that included President Trump's top national security officials from the vice president on down. He could not believe what he was seeing. In fact, initially he feared he was being deceived, as someone purporting to be the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth discussed airstrikes against Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, and then even included a top-secret timeline for America's military assault.
Why it was so dangerous to kind of release into the wild of a commercial messaging app was these are the things that are going to happen in the immediate future, and some of these things involve American pilots. It was at 1:45 this is going to happen, at 1:52 this is going to happen. And so, I sat and I waited.
In a Washington supermarket car park where Mr. Goldberg finally realized that he really was seeing real-time communication between top Trump officials over the insecure Signal app, because at the very moment the war plan called for airstrikes to begin on Yemen 2 Saturdays ago, the journalist saw real-time reports of airstrikes on Yemen.
Nobody's texting war plans,
says the defense secretary, who was definitely texting war plans into the Signal chat room that the Russians, the Chinese, or even the Houthis themselves could definitely have monitored.
There's no units, no locations, no routes, no methods, no classified information.
But not a single former national security official is buying that argument.
The Atlantic is a failed magazine. The guy's a total sleazebag.
The president, who had earlier insisted there was no classified information in the chat, which resulted in Jeffrey Goldberg then revealing evidence of classified information in the chat, was by Wednesday evening ploughing a new furrow.
I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you. And I think that's what we have to, because you use Signal and we use Signal and everybody uses Signal, but it could be a defective platform.
I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
Twisting in the wind, Mike Waltz, the president's, and I cannot stress this enough, national security advisor, struggling to explain to Laura Ingraham on Fox News why he ever wanted to connect over Signal in the first place with Mr. Goldberg, a reporter that he now calls an anti-Trump hater.
So a staffer did not put his contact information. But how did it end up in your phone?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay. But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then somehow it gets sucked in, it gets sucked in.
It gets sucked in. Let me tell you what many officials in the White House reckon. They think Mr. Waltz might be a leaker, which is why he sounds so flummoxed whenever he's asked about why he ever reached out to Jeffrey Goldberg in the first place. They also think he may not be up to the mark of overseeing the nation's national security, which also raises a question for our Prime Minister. How many more British secrets is the UK government going to share with American officials who have proved themselves to be complete complete, utter amateurs. Let's go quickly to Capitol Hill, where Martha Kellner of Sky News decided to ask our favourite conspiracy theory-believing Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, if she thinks any heads should now roll.
Should the Defence Secretary...
What country are you? Wait, what country are you from?
The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
She then turned to an American reporter who, to his eternal credit, asked exactly the same question. Let's end this week with the future of comedy. Comedy of the deliberate kind. Last Sunday at the Kennedy Center, Conan O'Brien accepted the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor and unloaded on the very perilous atmosphere of the hour.
Twain wrote, "Patriotism is supporting your country all of the time and your government when it deserves it." Now, some of you might be thinking, what does this have to do with comedy? It has everything to do with comedy. Comedy that is self-critical, deflating, and dedicated to the proposition that we are all flawed, absurd, and wallowing in the mud together.
Tell you what, Tom, let's take another wallow at the same time next week.
From Washington, D.C., Simon Marks, American Week.